Just drawing up a pattern for the repair section here. The bottom piece that sits on the floor, I think I've got the right shape for that now. Now I'm working this out based on where I think these panels will line up down here. So, as I say, I think I've got that pretty right. The other thing I'm using is some photos that I found on the internet, courtesy of Monocoque Metalworks in America. They do post photos of some of their repair work, so I've seen some repairs they've done to this, so I know the shape, but I've got to work out how I now actually make it. So bottom piece is right. This section here that bends down, I'm going to try and make that separately. That's what I'm about to do now. So I've got to do a repair all the way along here and shape it down into there. So that's what I'm about to do. So I'll just do some preparation in terms of the size of the metal. I've just done some rough sketches on a piece of paper here. So I know the size of the piece of metal I need, so I'll cut a piece of metal out. I'll probably put the two curves at the ends first, and then I'll make up some form of form where I can bend this down. So that's what I'm about to do, but I'll show you what I'm proposing once I've got a little bit more work done. Now, I've only been able to stretch this so far. Might see it a bit better with that. With cold metal, I decided to put a bit of heat in here so I can stretch the metal more, because it's actually got to come down almost to the level of the wood there. So I'll apply some heat and then do that. So I'll just put the video off for a second while I get the torch. Right, now I just heated up the section here with the oxy torch, and just to a light red, then use the old brake piston and hit it down. Now that's about the right sort of curve, and by repeatedly knocking that down, I appear to have got it pretty much to the right shape in the corner. It's pushed that down a little bit further than this, so I've got to rectify this and straighten that so it comes down to the bottom of the curve. So that's a bit high, but I'll do that. I'll take, when this cools off, I'll take this off the board and knock that down as well. Now it's probably close enough to start doing some trial fitting, because I'll have to modify it anyway when I feed it up to the car. So it's still a bit hot. So that's how you form curves. I mean, use anything. So I started that with just a wooden handle to bend the curves, these curves, bent the metal around the curves. But to get this deeper shape and to stretch the metal, I've had to apply heat in there. It just makes it a bit easier to stretch the metal. So that's come down nicely. Now I'll go and see how this fits on the car and just clean up this. It's probably still got a few little dents I need to take out. I can do that by planishing it around the edge of that, so that's not a problem. So I'll continue with this and clean it up, shape a little bit more there, as I said, fit it up, cut it where I need to cut it. I might start bending these flanges over. This one here goes over that way, and then it pops up a little bit on the edge there, not that high, but about probably an eighth of an inch or a bit more, and then goes out again like that. So I should have enough metal on there to be able to do that. This is too deep. I did that on purpose because when I bend these, it alters the fit against the floor, so I've got to modify the edges here so it will sit flat across the floor, which it won't because I've started to bend the metal a bit. So I'll make sure it fits across the floor here before I actually make a final cut along the back here. So probably the cut will go about there, and it will curve up this way because there's rust up in this section here. So I'll continue on. It's still not finished, but it's got a fair way to go, but the major work appears to be done. Alright, here's the trial fit. The curve appears to be right. I've had to trim the edges here and along here because of the stretched metal, but now it fits the floor. What I'll do next is bend these flanges over and cut the excess off. So I've got to do that yet, and I'll do that before I cut the actual repair section. As I said, most of this along this back edge isn't needed, but the shape is pretty good. May not be exactly the same, but it's fairly close. What I'll do before I actually weld anything in, but I have to fold these first, is to trial fit the handbrake, just to make sure that there's no interference with the operation of the brake lever. But for what I've seen so far, when I've put the lever up, it actually doesn't go back too far into this anyway, so that should be sufficient. Now I've gone about as far as I can go with shaping it. I haven't clamped it in place yet, but I spent a lot more time reshaping this, just pushing it down a little bit further. Put some preliminary bends in. They've still got to be bent a bit further over. Not worried about that just yet. What I will probably do now is just a little bit more shaping around the rear end here. This is roughly where I'll cut it. I might cut it a little bit further in, but not much further. So I'll just check what I've done. As I say, a bit more curve in there, a bit more curve in there. I'll probably bend that down. Then I'll put the bottom plate in here, and look at doing some tack welds. So that's what I've got to cut next. I'll cut it oversized. I'll see if I get the right place to clamp all this in place, and then I'll tack the bottom piece on. So that's where I'm headed now. Now I've just tacked this into place, the bottom section to the main repair. Haven't cut it yet. I want to try and see if I can do a weld along the seam. Now I'll probably weld it from the other side, maybe some welds on this side, but mainly the other side so I can grind it off. But it seems to be in place. As I say, I've yet to cut this and finish the return bend on that, but I'll just take it out now and see if I can finish the weld. By the way, I've actually put the hole in there. The original grommet fits that. I've put the handbrake mechanism in place. Everything seems to line up okay, so I'll just see if I can weld it into one piece. The fabrication of this section continues. I've welded the bottom piece in, welded both sides and then cut off the excess. So there's a heap of there's a heap of weld in there. I put a seam well along here. I can't grind that off, but it's under the handbrake and can't be seen anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. The main thing was to make sure it had good penetration between the two different sections. What I've got to do now is to actually start cutting the old metal out and continue to fit this. It's taken hours to get to this stage, but it's still a long way from being able to weld any section in, but it's certainly getting a lot closer. So as I say, I've marked where I need to cut this, so I'll cut that and then finish folding this. This section's got to fold over, and it comes up about 1/8 of an inch and then folds out that way, so I need to do that and then reshape anything I need to reshape to fit it up with the join here. I'm continuing with the trial fit of this. Cut the bad metal out. I've got to the stage where I've almost fitted the shape to the existing panel. Just a bit more work to do on this end. Had to reshape in here a little bit, mainly to get the mount to sit properly, so that's almost done. So it's getting very close. I've fitted the handbrake lever just to see how everything lines up. With that, I've actually marked the position of the mounting holes at the front here. I've yet to make the bracket that goes under that with the captive nuts, but getting close to doing that. As I say, just a bit more shaping to do on this end here where it's got a curve down into there. I just don't have that curve yet, but as I say, getting very close. So a little bit more work. It's taken, actually I haven't added up the hours, but a lot of hours. This section here has taken me more time than any other panel I've done so far. I should add up the hours when I get to the stage of welding it in, but it would be well in excess of 20 hours. As I say, I really didn't have something to copy, so I'm doing it off photographs and fitting the handbrake lever itself, just to make sure that the shape that I think it should be is in fact the shape that's needed to get sufficient clearance. So anyway, it's getting closer, but when I get close enough, I'll put probably a clip in here to hold this up into position while I look at how I weld that. I've now finished making the repair section. It's taken a long time. The main difficulties are in getting this curve on the bottom right, and not only that, turn that around, but bearing in mind that the mount for the handbrake, there's a bracket that goes in here and up. Well, this has to be flat, but soon after the flat section it goes down into the corner, so getting that shape right so the bracket would fit took quite a bit of time. The curve on the end, it's not just straight because of where I've cut it, it curves over. That was really the final change I had to make to the panel. Now, all of these things have been made here on the workbench, and using curves like that. There's a brake piston, using that, using the wooden block itself, or even a small radius I've got on the end of this piece of steel here, which I use to make the, so I'm trying to do two things at once, make the curve on the end of the panel there. But anyway, it's all now made. I'll put the captive nuts in the end there. They're all lined up to the handbrake bracket because I've already checked that. So now it's a case of putting it in and welding it in place. I've already fitted the panel, so I've got sufficient gap all the way along. I just now need to clamp it in and start the process of welding, which will take quite some time too, but once it's done, that makes the completion of the transmission tunnel itself. So, but as I say, this is the hardest bit by far of the tunnel, and looking at the amount of metal I've had to cut out, there's not much of the section I didn't have to replace. I just need to explain some sequencing issues regarding the production of these monthly updates. The reason for that I'll explain shortly is that when I do these, it actually takes probably about a week or so, sometimes a bit more, to compile all the videos, edit them and put them into one sequence that I can upload on YouTube. I'm also doing that not just for this car, but for another vehicle as well. So I'm doing 2 sets of videos a month, and by the time these are uploaded, I've actually progressed further on the work. Now, the reason I'm saying that is that in the last monthly update on this, I was still working out the shape of this and trying to finalise what it should be. Now, when this was published, I'd already progressed a lot further on the shape and almost finalised things. Now, I received a comment from, not a comment, some pictures of this piece here from Paul from the E Type Club in England. He posted some photos for me on the forums web page. Now, what Paul posted actually confirms very close to what I've got, so I'm pleased with that. So I hadn't actually welded this in place at that time, but getting very close to doing that. So thanks again, Paul, for giving those photos. That actually confirms that I've got very close to the shape I need. Now, this of course has reached the stage of welding in place, but before I do that, I like to make sure that everything is going to work all right once it's done. Now, this is a handbrake mounting point, so I need to make sure that the all the pieces, that the handbrake fits and can be operational. Now, I've already got the captive nuts on this end of the piece. I haven't welded this in place yet. The final position for that I can basically draw up now once I put the large screws into there. Now I'll just pause the video because one thing I forgot was to get the screws. Now I need to get out of the car because I'm standing in the vehicle while it's on the rotisserie, so I'll just pause the video and I'll go and get the screws. Alright, just got the screws, and there might be a little bit more noise in the background. I've got the kids home from, well, my grandchildren home from school because they live with me. In Australia, or particularly in this part of Australia, we've now gone into temporary lockdown because of the coronavirus. Kids are home from school where they're able to be home, and because they live with me, they can stay home, and that's all very fine, but the difficulty there is now they have to be homeschooled, and I'm involved in that as well, so it's taking a little bit of time out of doing this. So I'm actually doing this in the school lunch break. Now, I wanted to make sure that this all actually fits properly. Now, as I say, that's to be welded in. I'll mark the position for that shortly. That needs to be up a little bit there. Might be able to clamp that in. Just get it roughly in the right position. Okay. Oh, no. Need to put that down. So, when I get this in place, which it is now, I need to make sure it will operate without this bolt fouling on the cowling there. Which it will do, that's fine, that's clear. So I've only got the bolts in this end at the moment. And the other thing I want to make sure of, and I want to do it now rather than once everything's welded. Just open that up a bit. Just to make sure everything is in alignment. Just to fit that over the top. Okay. And that's to make sure that that's right. So it's fitting as it should do around the lever. I don't know whether that can be seen through the video. Yes, it can. That fits around there, and everything should be fine. So do that, pull that off. Okay. Now the reason I do this sort of thing is to avoid surprises at the other end. So one thing I've learned from previous restorations is that you need to trial fit things. Otherwise, when you've got this beautiful panel or you know, in paint or something, you go to put this handbrake on, you find out it doesn't line up. It's a bit late. And then you've got to undo all the good work you may have done. So it's just another precaution that I take. So a little bit longer, but it makes sure everything fits. Nothing fouls on things, so everything's clear at the bottom end there. The handbrake cable goes through the hole, pretty well central in there, so that's good. So everything's fine. It's pretty much ready to weld in, which I will start, maybe not just now, because it's time to go back into homeschooling, but maybe later today I'll start to weld this in. The handbrake repair section has been completed. Just welded in the bracket. I welded that in with the handbrake mechanism in place, so I know that it will definitely fit. So that's taken a long time, but it's in the end it's worked out okay. Quite solid. This is getting more and more solid every time I add a bit of metal to it. What I'll do next is to put this side panel in. Now I've got a parts suppliers repair section for that. I had a preliminary fit, doesn't quite fit. I've got to make a few modifications around here, and also probably going up, the light's come up, also up in here, just to make sure that the shape is right. Now, bearing in mind I made the end of this, so it may not be exactly the same as what the original was. It's not far out anyway. It's only 1/8 of an inch at most. So I've got to put that in. I'll probably leave the car on its side while I start that, just because it's a bit easier to stand in the car and work on it. But before I make any final judgments, I'll tip the car up the other way, put the floor back in, and make sure it's properly lined up with the floor. So that's the next part of the puzzle. It's good to have the transmission tunnel finished off. Oh, sorry, one thing that's not finished off are the little tabs that go in here to hold on that outer piece. I haven't made those, and so I've got to look at that. So a couple of little things to make up with captive nuts in them. So I've got to do that. I can't forget that, otherwise there's nothing to hold that cover on. So that's complete. I didn't actually add up the full hours, but it's probably around 23 hours, 24 hours of work. A lot of time for such a small part, but anyway, it's done. Now I'm filming this inside the car again on a tripod. It's a little bit awkward because as I point to things, some things may or may not be in the camera. Okay, cleaned up the old piece of side panel off there. Haven't cleaned up the metal yet, not too worried about that just yet. This is the aftermarket panel from one of the major suppliers. It doesn't fit as supplied, it needs some modification. I had to make one modification to this flange here. Make sure you can see it. Yep. At this end, I had to drop the flange down a little bit. At the bottom end, it lines up with the floor where the floor's cut away. Key alignment points. We have a gearbox mount here with a captive nut that's yet to be put on, and corresponding hole in the floor. Now, as it was supplied, that didn't line up. fact the panel was dropped below that, so I've actually had to stretch the metal in there a little bit. You can probably see the marks, which put more of a curve in there, so it lifted the panel up a bit. So that now lines up with that hole, and just to help position it, I just dropped that large bolt through. Just do it up. Okay. I've also had to cut this panel back about 1/8 of an inch because it was slightly long, and made some corresponding cuts around here just to make adjustments where I've tried to cut out around the bottom of the panel so it fits around the pillar. Not the pillar, sorry. I'm thinking vertically. This is horizontal. The floor cross member. The other major alignment points, of course, are these holes for the cover. Now, I've managed to get that to fit, so I'll just put this on. That's on now. Not that you can see this yet, but these holes now line up. The back one not so much, because I've got a little bit more work to do on that. On the rear end, make sure that's, just tilt the camera down a bit. On the rear end there are a couple of other issues to address with the aftermarket panel. One is the fit around the tunnel. Now, the tunnel is basically a straight edge up to that pencil line, but the panel is actually curved from the bottom all the way around. Just a gentle curve on the bottom, so I need to straighten that up to there so it fits flush with the tunnel, because that's where the handbrake mount comes over, so it can't be angled up, it has to be flat. Then the curve needs to go from that pencil line there around to the bottom here. Now, at the moment it's not fitting there, so it's, what would it be? Well, so the black part of the pencil there away from the panel, so that's got to be tighter around the bottom. Now, to do that, I will probably have to, what am I going to do? Maybe stretch that metal. I'm going to be careful with this, because if I do it incorrectly, if I just bend that, it takes it away from the alignment of the top hole here. So that's got to stay in position. Just sort of clamp that. Basically, that's lined up with the hole there. So I don't want to curve the top, but I've just got to curve the bottom. So it's not much, but it's just got to go round. And I've got to have enough of a lip there so I can get a good weld. So I'll have to look at how I do that. So it's very close to being a fit. Just a little bit more to work to do this end. Make sure I can get it to fit on the flanges that are on the cross member just underneath this. There's one under there, and there's one under this side. This side's very close. This one's up a little bit, but that's probably because of the shape of that. So when I change the shape of that, it will bring that down. So that's pretty close. Saved a lot of work, still takes a fair bit to fit. Once I've done this, I'll drill it ready for welding. I'll probably screw it in place, and before I weld I'll do the other side just to make sure that everything is going to be properly lined up when everything's together. So after finalising this, I'll go to the other side panel and do that.